According to General Hospital teasers, Willow Tate may be revealed as Daisy Gilmore's stalker, and Drew Kane may exact revenge on his fugitive bride. Fans of GH will remember that Drew soon knew it had to be Willow after Nina Reeves accused him of stalking Sasha Gilmore Corbin's child. Drew figuring it out right before his wedding, which might be ruined, might be significant. Willow appears on the verge of vomiting as she prepares to go down the aisle to Drew. Now that Willow is aware that Drew had an affair with Nina while she was falling deeply for him, this is the last man she wants to wed. If Willow doesn't agree to marry him as planned, Drew might have to pay the price for being silent about it for more than a year. Given the likelihood that Willow will leave the chapel without getting married, Drew might lose his temper. Drew may conclude that he might as well turn against Willow if she is going to turn against him. Drew might undermine Willow's attempts just when she believes she might be able to work out a deal with Michael Corinthos and see her children once more. Any chance Willow has to reclaim Wiley and Amelia Corinthos could be ruined if Drew reveals Willow as Daisy's stalker. Michael will undoubtedly react strongly if he hears any fresh information about this Willow baby stalker. Drew won't have concrete evidence that Willow is to blame, of course, but Michael won't have any trouble believing it. Willow's agitated, remorseful response may provide Michael all the information he requires. Willow playing with Sasha's brain and making them both believe Daisy was in danger could cause Michael to blow up. Michael might make another audacious statement about Willow never seeing her kids again as a result of this, and he might stress that this time he means it. If he blows Willow's life up even more, Drew might gloat. It's simple to picture Drew making fun of Willow for her heartbreak and claiming that she ought to have married him as they had intended. According to General Hospital spoilers, Willow won't get away with following Daisy indefinitely, so watch to see whether Drew comes forward to expose her. According to General Hospital spoilers, Drew Kane and Willow Tate may get a shocking awakening during their wedding ceremony. Willow could confront Drew when she walks down the aisle now that she is aware of the truth about his affair with Willow's mother, Nina Reeves. She would tell Drew that she would never forgive him for his lies, and that she could never marry him because of what he had done. Willow would be horrified and would try to argue his way out of it, but it wouldn't change anything. She's done. When Willow abandons Drew at the altar, he is both heartbroken and furious with retaliation. Being betrayed by Willow Tate sends Drew Kane down the road after losing Willow. Drew becomes even more vindictive in his scheme against Portia Robinson. Curtis Ashford will regret ever telling Willow the truth about Nina and Drew, and he will escalate his demands. For manipulating Heather Weber's test results, Curtis will not allow Portia to turn herself in. Drew is determined to continue causing Curtis pain, and Curtis might be forced to consider permanently dumping Drew. Kai Taylor discovers the real story of Drew King. Kai Taylor may hear Drew pursuing Portia and Drew and comprehend that he has been on the wrong side, and that Drew is pursuing them in a significant manner. He would understand that Drew is trying to harm both Portia and Curtis, and that he was wrong to tell him the truth about Curtis's scheme. At this time he might attempt to make amends. Willow Tate is blackmailed into returning to Drew Kane. Drew could threaten to reveal Willow's role in gaslighting Sasha Corbin, in order to blackmail Willow into returning to him. If Michael does not come back to Willow, Drew would threaten to tell her the truth. This would leave Willow stunned and puzzled, and she would be forced to reclaim Drew. Willow would be stuck and searching for a quick way out of this predicament. Drew Kane is shot after frightening the majority of Port Charles citizens. Drew would eventually have his retribution and be shot. Everyone in Port Charles would like to see Curtis dead now that he has further unleashed the monster in Drew. Even if his attacker were shot at his house, Drew Kane would ultimately be held accountable for his heinous actions. How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you believe Drew's situation will worsen even further? Will there be a growing number of people that want Drew dead? Is Drew going to get shot? As a soldier, a survivor, and someone who had seen disappointment and betrayal all too well, Drew had always been a man who bore secrets well. However, he was deeply wounded by the betrayal he endured on what ought to have been one of the most joyous days of his life. He was left standing at the altar by his fiancée, the lovely and apparently sincere lady he had intended to start a life with. The fugitive bride simply disappeared, leaving a trail of misunderstandings and rumors in her wake, without providing an explanation or an apology. Drew, however, had little interest in sympathy or passive heartache. In addition to wanting the truth, he also desired retribution. The days that followed were a haze of awkward condolences and icy looks from Port Charles residents who were at a loss for words. Nina, Jason, and Carly all made a gentle effort to tell Drew that sometimes these things simply happen and that he should move on. However, Drew was unable to let it go. He felt uneasy about something. He began to retrace every event that had occurred before the wedding, including her abrupt mood swings, her cryptic text messages, and her clear avoidance of Willow. More than anything else, that last bit was noteworthy. Around Willow, she had changed from being courteous to aloof and occasionally even suspicious. Previously, Drew had attributed it to pre-wedding anxiety, but now it appeared to be more paranoid. Or shame. After saving his life more times than he could remember, Drew's instincts were now yelling that the betrayal he had experienced was just the beginning of something much more sinister and twisted. He shifted his attention to Willow, who had reportedly been a bright spot in Port Charles. A loving wife, a devoted mother, and someone who had fought cancer with kindness and dignity. However, Drew had no interest in what people thought. Truth was what he was interested in. Additionally, something about Willow's meticulously maintained look stopped making sense. A string of late-night discoveries confirmed his suspicions. He started by breaking into the fugitive bride's cloud account, which she had neglected to protect. He discovered journal entries filled with fear and anxiety, focused on a person she called simply D. At first, Drew assumed it was a reference to him, but as he read on, he realized that D was actually someone who had been following her, leaving notes, gifts at her door, and even appearing in the same location she had mentioned in passing on the internet. This wasn't how a friend or admirer would act. Obsession was the cause. Drew grew increasingly uneasy as he read more. His ex-fiancée had been attempting to hide from someone. In fact, she acknowledged in her blog that she had left the wedding in order to protect Drew from this stalker. Then something went wrong. One entry from 2 weeks before to the wedding mentioned the initials Drew was familiar with. W. Tate Willow. I thought it was over when she got sick, the entry said. I believed I wouldn't see her ever again. Now that she's back, though, I feel as though I can't breathe around her. She looks at me as if to challenge me to speak. She is aware of my actions, as well as what she did. Everything falls apart if he finds out, Willow said. Drew was trying to figure out why. Why would Willow, who seemed like such a nice person, torture another lady in this way? The answer was found in the past, a past that most people had either forgotten or were unaware of. Willow used to go by the name Callie, when she was a member of the Dawn of Day cult years ago. She rarely talked about this period of her life because it was filled with trauma and manipulation. However, because of his relationship with Peter August and the digital trail Shiloh's operation left behind, Drew was able to access information from that time frame. When Drew compared those files, he discovered something unsettling. Willow, who was then known as Callie, had met Daisy Kwan, a young woman. One of Shiloh's most devoted supporters, Daisy had been coerced into complete loyalty. Despite being a victim herself, Willow had betrayed the cult and contributed to its dismantling. Daisy, on the other hand, had disappeared soon after, presumably living off the grid or worse due to the upheaval. What if Daisy hadn't disappeared, though? What if she had just started again as Drew's future fiancée and changed her name? Everything started to come together. His ex was running from Willow, who might have realized who she really was and decided to scare her away, not merely from a failed relationship or cold feet. However, why would Willow go to such lengths? Was it retaliation, guilt, or something else entirely? Had she chosen to impose her own kind of justice after realizing Daisy? Or was there something else she was shielding? Drew took a stealthy next move. He began following Willow, noting her whereabouts, conversations, and internet searches. His fears were quickly confirmed. Willow had been close to his ex's apartment complex 3 times without a valid purpose. She had no friends, no relatives, and no patients in the region. She once watched the building for almost an hour without ever going inside, as if she were waiting for someone, or observing someone. However, Drew required more than suspicion and chance. He required proof. Knowing that the eccentric hacker would pose questions but eventually complete the task, he recruited Spinelli's assistants. They looked into phone records, surveillance cameras, and message forums where Daisy or his ex-fiancée had previously commented anonymously. And they discovered damning evidence. Burner account messages were linked to IP addresses that corresponded to Willow's hospital Wi-Fi access. It was going to be difficult to confront Willow after receiving notes signed with the letter C, and with spooky lines like, You can't hide what you did, and justice always finds you. Although he didn't want to frighten her, Drew had to take action. He caught her during a break on the rooftop garden on a calm afternoon in the hospital. Her face was engraved with the strain of her previous sickness and ongoing emotional troubles, making her appear exhausted and older than her years. Daisy's response was immediate when Drew said her name. Her eyes grew wide. She tensed up. She opened her lips to respond, then closed it again. Furthermore, no confession could express what that silence did. You were aware of her identity, Drew muttered. You knew and you still... Willow finally whispered, her voice trembling. She lied. She gave me the impression that I was insane. She attempted to return to our life as if nothing had occurred, despite everything she had done in that cult and everything we had both experienced. As if she had not participated in the abuse. As if she didn't hire anyone. As if Mom hadn't taken me to Shiloh's place that first night. Drew swallowed, her voice's unadulterated grief tempering his anger. So you followed her around? Willow said, almost defiantly now. I watched her. Because nobody else would. She had a plan. I sensed it. She was with you after that. Drew took a while to reply. And I thought, God, I thought she was going to hurt you too. The smell of summer rain and something unsaid were carried by the wind as it brushed across the rooftop. He realized then that the suffering was not at all one-sided. Willow's actions were the result of trauma, not cruelty, out of terror, of sin. However, that did not justify her actions. Because she was unable to let go of the past, she had pushed someone away from a fresh start and a second opportunity. Over the next few weeks, Drew shared what he had discovered. To the people closest to the crisis, not the media or the police. The truth was revealed to Carly, Michael, and even Jason in private, circumspect discussions. The reaction was silent and vicious. Willow, who was formerly respected and trusted, is now the subject of watchful looks and rumors. Although she continued to work at the hospital, the warmth in her co-workers' grins started to fade. Conversely, Drew was not satisfied with the retribution he had previously pursued. His bride had vanished, her history made public. In unexpected ways, Willow was broken. Additionally, he had evolved from a man seeking closure to one who recognized the potentially harmful effects of untreated trauma. Ultimately, Port Charles reverted to its typical cycle of disorder and recovery. Drew, however, was still unique. A bit chilly, a bit more shrewd, and far more conscious of the fact that love, trust, and suffering frequently go hand in hand, and that sometimes the true enemy isn't treachery but rather the ghosts we never fully leave behind. For months, Drew's decline into darkness had been intensifying, gradually tearing apart the strands of his former self. He had changed from being a man who had stood for loyalty, justice, and fairness. Power usually has a cost in Port Charles, where things change swiftly, but nobody anticipated Drew Kane's rapid and drastic decline. His decisions had become riskier, his ego and retaliation had tainted his objectives, and every action he did only led him farther into an unmanageable tangle. When Drew intensified his desire to be in charge of everything began to fall apart. Something inside Drew cracked as he lost control of Michael, and was unable to keep Carly on his side. He had put a lot of effort into earning respect, but the more he attempted to manipulate things behind the scenes, the more he damaged his relationship with those who had once trusted him. He developed an obsession with secrets, blackmail, and leverage. He was changing the rules of the game, not just playing dirty. Drew set out to eliminate Sonny with surgical precision after concluding that he was the cause of all the town's issues. Sonny, however, was no idiot. Sonny felt Drew's change while battling his own issues and treachery. What started out as a tenuous alliance quickly became a quiet conflict. Drew was determined to keep Sonny away from his supporters. He gently fostered strife among family members using false information and manipulated documents, urged Michael to reevaluate custody arrangements, and hinted Jason couldn't be trusted. He began to rely on Valentine for resources, using company leverage and trade secrets to obtain what he required. He became brazen and nearly irresponsible in his manipulation of Aurora's assets. However, Drew's treatment of Willow was what really went too far. He used her condition as a weapon. Playing on her maternal instincts and her fear of disorder, he conjured up tales about Sonny's instability to make her believe that her children were in danger because of Sonny. It was chilly. calculated, nearly psychopathic. Unaware that she was being emotionally manipulated by someone she had once trusted, Willow began to distance herself from Sunny. Even Brooklyn, who had made an effort to believe Drew, started to notice that the facade was faltering. She heard Drew on the phone with a notorious fixer, a man who specialized in hiding business wrongdoing. The tension between them never went away, even when she confronted Drew and he gaslight her, saying she misunderstood. The Quartermaines were losing what little goodwill they still had in spades. Meanwhile, Jason had been surreptitiously monitoring Drew's whereabouts. Jason had enough proof to face him after months of suspicion and silent surveillance. Drew, however, wasn't merely suspicious. He was prepared. Drew didn't say anything when Jason confronted him late one night in the Quartermaine study. Rather, he chuckled, mocked Jason's ethics, referred to him as weak for not completing the task at hand. It was a chilling moment, and Jason realized that this was no longer about redemption. Drew had completely lost his mind. When Drew tried to blame Sunny for a warehouse explosion, the tension in Port Charles reached a breaking point. It was hurried and careless but lethal. A handful of Sunny's crew members suffered minor injuries, and more would have perished if Brick hadn't discovered the scheme in time. Although Sunny's rage was intense, he took some time to respond. He waited. Drew regarded that as a sign of weakness. Then the last straw appeared. Sunny might have been exonerated in a federal court if Drew hadn't intercepted a private document from Dex. He buried it rather than gave it to someone. Carly was distraught when she learned. Drew didn't deny that she publicly challenged him. He actually hurled it back at her, claiming that she would have chosen the stronger side if she truly cared about keeping her family safe. Carly gave him a slap. Following Drew's formal removal from any controlling interest in Aurora, the ensuing Quartermaine board meeting ended in chaos. Drew struck out because he was alone, trapped, and had nothing left to lose. Once more in front of onlookers, he threatened Jason. He threatened to silence Willow. At the Metro Court, he confronted Michael and yelled that Michael had betrayed him loudly enough for half the town to hear. The damage was already done. He was going downhill, and everyone was aware of it. The night that altered everything then arrived. Drew had intended to have a final confrontation with Sunny. Not to speak, not to bargain, to put a stop to it. With a gun hidden under his coat and a desire for vengeance, he arrived at the warehouse on Pier 46. Sunny wasn't by himself, though. Jason was lurking in the shadows, anticipating Drew's next move. The next events were swift and violent. First, Drew yelled, accused Sunny of taking his life and betraying him, among other things. For a moment, it appeared as though he might actually pull the trigger. Then a shot went off, but it wasn't from Drew's firearm. From the rear. With a cry of agony, Drew fell to the ground after being struck in the shoulder by a single bullet. He splashed blood down his suit. He was taken aback. Jason took a step forward, voice icy, pistol steady. Drew made it impossible even though he assured him it didn't have to be this way. Drew bled, yet he laughed. Told Jason that he had already lost and that the harm he had caused could not be repaired, even if he were imprisoned. I'm not the villain, he said in his terrifying last words before fainting. I'm just what this town made me. He was taken barely conscious to General Hospital. Willow came to see him in spite of everything. Perhaps due to guilt. Perhaps out of sympathy. She observed as medical professionals attempted to stabilize him. He was broken, but he wasn't dead yet. His name was dragged through the mud. His empire was in shambles, and everyone he had ever professed love for had rejected him. Carly was crying when she stood outside his room later that night, not because she still loved him, but rather because she missed the man he had been. She met the Drew following Jason's passing, the guy who assured me of strength, safety, and second chances. However, that man had left, replaced by a person who was so desperate for power that he didn't care who he destroyed to achieve it. Sitting at home, Michael gazed at old pictures of better days when Drew was just Uncle Drew, a man who came to his rescue when all else failed. There was a sharp pain in his chest, relief combined with loss. Even though he detested Drew's transformation, a part of him still missed the man who had previously attempted to keep them safe. Jason poured himself a drink after returning to the apartment. He gazed out the window, troubled by the extent of his brother's decline. Drew was more than simply a foe. He belonged to the family. Jason couldn't help but wonder if any of this would have occurred if he had made a stronger effort to stop him sooner. Doctors kept an eye on Drew's vitals while he remained unconscious at General Hospital. No guests. Not a single blossom. No encouraging messages. Only a cold room, equipment beeping ceaselessly, and the distant echo of everything he had lost. He was already a ghost in the community he had previously attempted to control, regardless of what transpired next or if he woke up. And poor Charles went on outside. More slowly. Less noisy. With caution. Because Drew Kane's demise was a warning as much as a tragedy. That ambition has the power to consume even the strongest. After being fed, that vengeance never stops wanting more. Furthermore, there is no guarantee of redemption.